Hello, everyone. Paymon is still enjoying his summer break with his family over the next week. In the meantime, we have planned a great and informative video for you to watch. This week, we will be showing the second and last part of Slave Nation. This informative documentary was co-produced by Freedom Law School. It dives deep into the realities surrounding the IRS and federal income taxes. Enjoy this educational content, and we look forward to returning to our normal live broadcast after he and his family return from their trip next week.
So what's your name, man?
I'm Lorenzo.
And what do you do here, Lorenzo?
I'm in marketing and sales.
That's awesome. Lorenzo, do you pay your taxes?
No.
Do you pay taxes?
Yep, everybody does, I guess.
Why?
Well, we have to keep the government the ways to provide us with whatever they do, basically.
Do you pay your taxes?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff, do you pay your taxes?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Everybody else seems to pay their taxes. I wanted to give my Social Security, which I'm getting now.
So, what's your name?
Bottleneck Bob.
Your name is Bottleneck?
Yes, it is.
Do you pay your taxes?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Because it's our civil duty.
Do you pay your taxes?
Unfortunately, yes.
Do you pay your taxes?
Of course, that's besides the point.
Want to do an interview about taxes? No? Your thoughts on taxes?
Yeah.
Why do you pay your taxes?
Why? It's a good question. Because everybody does, I don't know.
It's not about the taxes. It's all about administration. I voted for Barack. I voted for Hillary.
Taxes. Do you pay your taxes?
I know.
No?
Okay, but...
You pay your taxes? Why? Why do you pay your income taxes?
Depends.
Thoughts on taxes? Is it true that there isn't a federal law that says you have to pay taxes? Why do you pay taxes? No, he doesn't want an answer.
Keep doing what you want. Can you kiss them?
Yeah.
There's no other place on planet Earth that you can do who you are as a person. And I love you.
Yeah.
And
I'm here.
I'm not fake. Oh, good.
I know you're not. I'm good.
No, you can't kiss the cameraman. All right, see you later. Thank you so much.
I think with this whole tax question, you have to at some point take a step back and look from a broader perspective. Not only a broader historical perspective, but actually a broader spiritual perspective. Because what we find is we see that the United States of America was the first country in the history of the entire world to recognize that our rights, that human rights as we refer to them, are not granted by some group of people. They're not granted by a king. They are given to us by God, by our Creator, as Jefferson so eloquently stated.
We make a contract. We have the right to contract to do anything in the United States so long as it's not something illegal. So I'm going to cut Joe's grass, and Joe's going to give me a $100 bill. Now, I use my arms, my legs, and my brain to cut Joe's grass. And Joe, in exchange, gives me $100. So I used my life force to cut his grass in exchange for $100.
If I go out and I build a fence for you, and I agree to build the fence, and you agree to give me so many ounces of silver, has there been any income?
Look at the example of, let's say, the smallest Walmart in the country. They make $100,000 in a day, but they have salaries to pay. They have to pay electricity, they have to pay the rent on the building, and they have other expenses. And let's say their expenses were $60,000. That particular Walmart netted $40,000 after their expenses. They only pay tax on the $40,000. They don't have to pay tax on the $100,000 like I had to pay on the $100,000.
There really isn't any income, so this idea that your remuneration for working at a job for an employer is taxable requires that the IRS take the position that nothing you do has any value. You are a slave.
We don't live forever. Our life force is worth something. But to the IRS, our life force is worth nothing. Because every time we put out our life force, we're having to give of 100% of what we receive in exchange. And that's wrong on so many different levels.
Tonight we're honored to have Eustace Mullins, an author from the grand state of Virginia. And he has written numerous books. And this is such a great introduction here. It runs about 20 minutes. But we'll make it a little shorter than that. Eustace Mullins has garnered an impressive number of firsts. The first writer to have a book burned in Europe since World War II. The first person to be fired from the staff of the Library of Congress for political reasons. And the first writer to detail the history of our Federal Reserve system.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming this evening. My first question I have to ask you is, do you know where your government is tonight? Because you think of our government as being in Washington, D.C. More likely it is in New York, it is in London, it is in Paris. It is everywhere, but not in the hearts of the people.
There's a concept called divide and conquer. You get two people or nations fighting over each other, and behind the scenes, you assist both and conspire against both.
That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing. Fairly simple thing.
The European powers didn't just disappear when we won the revolution. They pulled back and they regrouped and said, okay, how are we going to take these guys on?
If America was allowed to grow without a privately owned central bank, it could have been an example to the whole world. But you don't need a central bank like England and France and other major European powers have. So they had to somehow destroy and weaken America.
This is the problem with government, that it does mischief. It falls into the hands of mischievous people, people who have allegiances which we do not know about, people who have programs which we do not know about, and people who intend us no good.
Divide and conquer, the tax on imports, slavery, all these other issues, to have the northern and southern states hate each other, get into war, and now, for the first time in the 1860s, there was a law passed that allowed the banks to make money out of thin air as long as they allowed the federal government to also get some of that money. So they bribed the federal government.
It's not a question of seeing conspiracies under every bed. It's a question of seeing conspiracies in every commercial activity and every political activity that goes on in this country.
Lincoln, when he got into the war hot and heavy, imposed a temporary income tax. And then for several decades, there was no income tax. And then Congress passed a law in early 1890s to tax the profits of real estate. The Supreme Court said, no, you cannot do that. So then what they did, they proposed the 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Well, I mentioned the conspiracy at Jekyll Island because it took a lot of plotting to get the people of the United States to accept a privately owned central bank. You see, we had one set up by Alexander Hamilton in 1787, the first bank of the United States. And Thomas Jefferson opposed it, and he got rid of it in 1812, so that caused the War of 1812. The British attacked us again in 1812 because Jefferson had put an end to their bank, and they retaliated with the War of 1812. In fact, you will find banking interests behind every major event of world history. They pull the strings. We're just puppets. The governments are puppets, and that's why the War of 1812 happened. The Civil War, World War I, World War II, you name it. They're bankers' wars.
The borrower is a slave to the lender. Every dollar that the banks and Federal Reserve lend out of thin air, they lend out to governments, corporations, businesses, and families to buy homes, cars, whatever. There's interest charged on that. So the entire economy, everybody and everything, we all pay interest to our slave masters the banksters?
It's a criminal syndicate, just like the mafia, which is one of its subsidiaries, and the CIA and all of the criminal syndicates work out of the Federal Reserve System, because that's what a Federal Reserve System is.
That's how it's been done for hundreds and hundreds of years. The international bankers are a small group of people that are related to each other.
John D. Rockefeller was one of the biggest holders, and he had his stock placed under the Rockefeller Foundation, so it can never be bought or sold, so it's secure forever. And the other people who bought control in 1914, they were the Schiff family and the Warburg family. The Federal Reserve System was set up solely for speculation, and its author, Paul Warburg, who was a partner of Kuhn Loeb Company in New York, financed the Communist Revolution, financed the Hitler Revolution, and financed the Japanese entry into World War II. 9/11 was a step in the right direction, and they can repeat 9/11 at any time, like the Murray Building bombing in Oklahoma City, and the Waco Holocaust of burning a church, an entire church congregation alive in their own church.
I found in my researches over the years that there are, in the world order, a three-tier hierarchical system of families.
To understand how American people were duped into becoming slaves of the federal government, we need to go back to America's foundings. In the U.S. Constitution, the Founding Fathers required direct taxes by the federal government to be apportioned or divided up amongst the states. The states would collect those direct taxes on property or slaves, take a 10% cut, and turn it over to the federal government. This was done in the late 1700s and early 1800s. However, by 1913, when the international bankers were going to create the Federal Reserve banking scam, they needed a way for the federal government to have a lot more revenue to pay the interest on the loans that the Federal Reserve bankers were going to make to the federal government.
I cashed it for you, didn't I? I discounted it for you.
Yes, and that was a mighty big convenience for me, too, right when I needed it.
And that $5 interest I charged you is what I call the discount rate.
And that's why they needed a federal income tax. They wrote the law in 1913 to apply only to District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, Alaska, Philippines, and U.S. territories. They did it this way because the federal government was given the power to do whatever it wanted to do in the land that was going to be given to the federal government, which became later on the District of Columbia, and any forts, military installations, other property that states would give to the federal government to protect the states from outside invasion by other countries. By 1960, the Philippines had become an independent country. Alaska had become a state. Hawaii became also a state in 1959. So today, in the federal tax laws, states in the United States only include District of Columbia. When you see that 10-4 income tax confession trap form that says it's a U.S. individual income tax return, they want you to believe it is the 50 states, when in reality it is only the District of Columbia individual income tax return. It's a deception to make you believe that now the federal government can tax the people of the 50 states.
I ended up resigning from the IRS on February 25th. 1999 was actually my birthday. What's interesting about my birthday on February 25th is that it was February 25th of 1913 when the income tax, the 16th Amendment, was proclaimed to be ratified. I thought maybe it'd be a big deal that an IRS criminal investigator had decided to ask some questions of his IRS supervisors, and the supervisors didn't care. They weren't interested. And the mainstream media wasn't interested either.
I wanted Joe not to leave the IRS because he thought the media would be honest and expose the fraud to the American people. And I knew the media wasn't honest. But that was his decision.
I went and spoke around the country. I got quite a bit of alternative media outlets paying attention to me. Alex Jones interviewed me way back in 1999.
His name is Joe Banister, and he was a special Treasury agent assigned to the IRS to investigate people that were filing fraudulent tax returns or simply hiding assets. And thanks a lot for spending some time with us, Mr. Banister. God bless.
Was on various radio shows. And I kept thinking, well, why is the mainstream media ignoring this issue? And then all of a sudden, the mainstream media started to pay a lot of attention to me.
The show, 60 Minutes, asked me and Joe and others to interview.
All of a sudden, like, wow, the mainstream media is paying attention to me. This is great.
And when the 60 Minutes piece came out, the first thing that you saw was Joe Banister on a, skateboard.
They said, well, we just want to show you as a regular guy, so what do you do as a regular guy? I said, well, I skateboard with my kids. This is, back in 2001. And so when they first put me on, when they broadcast 60 Minutes, they show me spinning around doing 360s on my skateboard, like I'm just some kind of a wacko.
Going around and around and around in circles. In my mind, and probably in most of the people that were watching, is, crazy or something. And then they just railed over him and just made him look so bad in that interview.
Well, I found out the hard way that the reason that the mainstream media was paying so much attention to me was that they were going to make sure as many Americans knew about me as possible before they took me down.
They saw an edge to indict him when one of the companies they'd been invited to speak at had stopped filing, and Joe had done some preparation for their books. So he didn't prepare the tax return that wasn't filed, but he'd done tax preparation for them. And so they thought, oh, we can indict him.
It was early in the morning, and my wife was taking our sons to school, and I hear this noise out in the front yard. So I go to the little bathroom window and I look out, and I see a San Jose Police Department car, a cruiser. And I think to myself, well, hey, my brother Jeff works for the San Jose Police Department. Maybe he's here to visit. And then I look a little bit more and I see a second police car. And I think to myself, well, Jeff usually doesn't bring a buddy when he comes to visit.
So I remember when I got an email from somebody that Joe Banister was indicted by the federal government for tax charges. It was about midnight. And I told myself, this is good news. Because I know Joe Banister has done nothing wrong. He's one of my best students.
At some point or another, we became more than low-flying gnats on their radar screen, and we were getting too popular. We were speaking all over the country, and people were starting to think. And they didn't want that critical thinking. So Joe was prosecuted. I spent 2 weeks out in Sacramento, California at his trial because I needed to be there. First of all, to support Joe. Next, to make sure that I knew what they were doing because I knew that I was going to be somewhere in that line of prosecution.
The prosecution had an IRS agent who I think had 25 to 30 years of experience. And he was the one to get up there on the stand and talk about how false these federal income tax returns were that I prepared.
Joe didn't testify. He had character witnesses to say that he was honestly looking at this, and the work that he did was being honest. He was not trying to skate any taxes or anything like that.
My defense attorney walked this IRS agent through all the lines and all the pages of the tax returns and said, you know, is there anything false in this section? Is there anything false on this page? What about this attachment? Is there anything false here? And the agent couldn't find a single false entry in the tax return. Yet I was charged with felonious preparation of false tax returns. So the jury, while they were out, they were asking the judge a few questions. They would submit the questions in writing, and they were asking for certain clarification. And the judge would say, I can't give you any more information. You have the information from the trial. That's all that I can give you.
All Jeff did after the prosecution put on their case, it was like a Perry Mason moment. He just played the videotape of Joe's lecture to the company employees, which was the prosecution's #1 piece of evidence. Then he stood up and said the defense rests. That, you know, you see that in Perry Mason or, you know, Law and Order, but it rarely happens in real life.
After quite a long deliberation, they came back, and I was probably nothing like that feeling. Probably the only other time I had feeling like that was when I'm watching either of my two sons be born. As far as just the emotional gripping that goes on as you're waiting to hear what the jury, you know, what your fate is. And the jury came back with not guilty on all 4 counts.
When the not guilties came back, you know, we were elated. I was jumping up and down, and his lawyers were great lawyers, and they got a chance to talk to the jurors afterward.
When you were going to deliberation, the SynCal tape, you requested to see it again. Tell us again why that second viewing, you know, what was significant about that to you fellas?
Because we hadn't really seen the whole picture before viewing the videotape the first time, and after seeing all the evidence and going through the rest of the trial, we wanted to see it again. Bottom line is, it would only been fair to Mr. Banister to look at what he'd said before in the proper context. And as far as evidence, I think the government's evidence actually worked against that.
I would like to call it a comedy of ignorance, but it's not funny. People go to jail over this. And so that's a problem. We need to get educated.
The solution is pretty simple. All we have to do is follow the footprint of America's founding fathers. They stopped paying taxes they legally owed to the King of England because he would not answer their petitions. He would ignore them.
Thomas Paine said something. He said, if there be trouble, let it be in my day, so that my child may have peace.
And I was a good chess player as a child. That was my favorite game to play. I learned to strategize, think several moves ahead of your opponent, about strategy. So I don't think the IRS expected that. So now I'm not worried about it. And the thing is, though, I think nobody should be afraid of the IRS. Because, folks, we got to pay people. It's a libertarian action. I'll pay you to go out there and talk.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do a quick survey here, quick survey. How many of you have ever heard of the name Roseanne? Ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter.
So we do these silent auctions in the back, you know, with all of our vendors. This is one of the great ones here because this one is for Fivefold Foundations, which is for veterans. And we had a great donation of $10,000 by Mr. Payman Motorhead. Mr. Payman Motorhead to our veterans. So it's just an unbelievable gift. And I wanted to personally say thank you to you, Payman, and God bless you.
This is exactly what America's founding fathers did. They stopped paying taxes that legally they were required to pay to King of England until the petitions were answered by the king, and they were ignored. And then they revolted with guns. We don't need to go that far. So, folks, it's simple. Defund the swamp. Fund freedom.
Jekyll Island Club was actually built on top of everything that the Indians had. So they just kind of wiped the village out and built the club on top of it. So wherever the chief's house was, there was a cottage now. Wherever the council house was, there was now the Jekyll Island Hotel. A group of French colonists came to the United States. This was right after Columbus. The first colony of French folks that came over to try to establish a colony on the coast. They landed in Jekyll Island, and they had some interaction with these Indians, and then they got so appalled by what they saw and witnessed that they fled at night and ended up in St. Augustine, Florida, and established that city. That tribe was called the Timucas. The Timucas, they're well established along the Florida and Georgia coast. They were quite prolific at one time. So he said, we know they're Native Americans. I said, well, all right, what else you got? He said, well, we got some skeletons. He said, you want to see the bones? And I said, well, yeah. When they found a burial site, they didn't move the bones. They left them where they were, and they just uncovered them to where they were visible, and then they built a museum on top of them. They did basically the same thing with the museum that the Jekyll Island guys had done with their houses. All of a sudden I look and I realize, man, these guys are really tall. And I commented to the guy that, how tall are these guys? They look unusually large. And he said, yeah, they're all about 8 or 8.5 foot tall. He said, oh, by the way, I've got a painting that you might want to see. I'm looking at it, and it shows the Indians and all their regalia, and they're dancing around and having some kind of a ceremony, and then I see an altar. I'm wanting to know, where is this altar? And so I asked him, I said, can you take me to this altar? He said, I can take you to the altar, but you can't see it. And I said, why can't I see it? Is it buried? He said, no, it's not buried, but it has a house built on top of it. I said, who would be crazy enough to build a house on top of a blood sacrifice altar? He said, well, Rockefeller was.
Thank you for joining us for the second and last part of Slave Nation. Make sure to tune into next week's Freedom Hour, where we get to our regularly scheduled program with Paymon. Thank you all and stay free.